Hello. Welcome back to another Art Break with Jan. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. So welcome. And just a reminder that these art breaks are meant to be just a little break, a little oasis for our mind in the middle of quarantine, something to think about that's outside of our regular endeavors and that's other than ourselves, something just new to think about and look at and consider and explore. So I am very glad you're with me today. And today, our little mental break is going to take us back to the Renaissance, and we are going to look at a painting by Raphael. And I'm going to show us the picture here. I just want to remind us, make sure you're sitting comfortably. Maybe roll your shoulders out, shake your hands, take a good few deep breaths. I'm going to time us. And I'm going to ask us just to let our eye meander around this painting. And please notice anything you can. Make a mental list of all you see. Colors, objects, light, shadow, people. Just let your eye roam and look carefully and try to see as many things as possible. We're about halfway through our minute. Okay, it's been a minute, thank you. Now, if we were live, I would interact with you on what your observations are, but we're not live, and so I'm gonna have to imagine. So I imagine some of us are seeing three people, a woman in this blue dress, a little naked boy, and then a little boy wearing something furry on the ground. It's round. I imagine some of us are seeing that in the back there's a landscape of sorts. I imagine people are seeing a book, and they're seeing like a reed that's kind of tied like a cross there. I imagine some of us are seeing a chunky something that this woman is leaning against. I imagine people are seeing just very soft and beautiful colors and some maybe fuzziness and gauziness to this painting. So that's what I hear most. It's common for me to hear people noticing these things. So thank you very much. And I'll tell you, this is the Alba Madonna, which is named that because it was owned by some dukes in Spain. But it's a painting by Raphael, and we call it the Alba Madonna. And it's 37 inches in diameter. And interestingly, it is oil that was on panel and has been transferred to canvas. So that's kind of interesting. Let's talk a little bit about this. In some of the other art breaks, we've talked about composition and how a triangle or pyramid is very pleasing to the human eye, and it's often used in establishing formation in a painting. And so we're looking here at a very lovely pyramid composition. Also, Raphael is painting these bodies with some of the classical idealism. So we think Mary seems a little proportionally too big. And I'll say male was the model for this. And if you look, that front left leg is a little long and large. And also she's got her right foot tucked underneath her, bearing her weight. And that would be a really hard position to hold. I'm not sure she could hold it for very long. But so Mary's a little large and maybe proportionally too big in places. We think the two young boys are a little more proportional, but you'll notice that idealism and kind of reference to classical sculpture, where they're a little more shredded maybe than we would normally think for little children that age. But I wanted to speak to just the composition and this style of idealized and reference to classical sculpture. And so let's talk about that this painting is in the shape of a circle, and that's called a tondo. Raphael painted this when he was in Rome, but we think it's referenced, this tondo is referencing back his time in Florence, when it was very popular in Florence at the time, this tondo circle. And I wanted to show it to you in situ here at the gallery, so you can kind of see how big it is. I also noticed that the frame that the curators have on this always casts that little shadow at the top. You can see it in both the photo of the gallery and the close-up of the painting. But that round shape was popular in Florence. And actually, this distinctive form of the tondo was experiencing a surge. People were interested in it because of the mystical significance of certain geometric shapes, and here it's the circle, because it was thought to embody eternity and heavenly perfection. And so I wanted to show you at the same time period, we have Leonardo doing the Vitruvian Man, and that's the image of a man created in the likeness of God, inscribed within a sphere. And then these two pictures here on the right, the center and the right are, you can see St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican. And when the architect was designing that, under the dome there, we see the floor plan right beneath. And that floor plan was to resemble a perfect circle within a perfect square. And so there was a resurgence in that kind of mystical interest in circles back then. So now let's get back to the subject matter of this Raphael painting. So this is Mary from the Christian Bible, New Testament, with Jesus on her lap and John the Baptist, his cousin, on the ground. We know it's John the Baptist because, well, lots of reasons, but one is he's giving us a clue with that camel hair outfit he's wearing, the clothing. In Matthew 3, verse 4, it says, John's clothes were made of camel's hair, and he had a leather belt around his waist. His food was locusts and wild honey. And although there's a real serene, bucolic feel to this painting, it actually has a more somber message, because we think this message shows that there's an understanding in this group of people of Christ's coming passion and sacrifice. There is this apocryphal legend in Catholicism that Christ, even though he was fully human, even as a small child, he had this sense of knowing of what his coming sacrifice was going to be. And so we can actually see this attention of the gaze is actually on that cross being held between John and Jesus. They both have their hands on it. They both have their eyes on it. The meaning of the cross connecting between them. And so as we look at Mary, I just want to take a minute to just digress and talk about Marys in painting. And I'm choosing paintings we have at the National Gallery of Art in DC. And this is just a fun little something to have in your back pocket when you're looking at Renaissance art and depictions of Mary. There's in general two categories or two interpretations of Mary. And so here we have Divine Madonna, Queen of Heaven. And she's on the throne or on a fancy cushion. She's Queen of Heaven because Jesus is King of Israel. And this title is also derived partly from the ancient Catholic teaching that at the end of Mary's life, at the end of her earthly life, she was bodily and spiritually assumed into heaven. And so these are the Divine Madonnas, and we have more at the National Gallery, but I picked these. And then these are examples of the Madonna of humility. And she's humble, she's earthly, she's approachable. See this, she's on the earth, she's sitting on the ground, or and actually the word, the Latin word humus has the meaning of earth or ground. And so you see this very approachable, humble, earthly Mary. I like the one in the middle here, this smile, and I recognize it as even if those two boys are tussling a little, she's smiling, she's very connected, and it seems like she delights in them. Okay, so our Madonna here, the Alba Madonna, is going to be a Madonna of humility. And she's sitting on the ground and she's resting against a dead tree, which is maybe alluding to Christ's coming passion. And note her soft motherly gaze toward the children and that cross. Now, even though this is the Madonna of Humility, I do want to tell you that in Renaissance painting, it's very common for saints like John the Baptist to have a halo. You can see it here. In the middle, any member of the Trinity, and this is Jesus the Christ, he would have the halo. It's very hard to see, but Mary, the Virgin Mary, had halos, and sometimes angels had halos. And so I just think it's fun to see. And if you're actually in the gallery looking, these are so fine, and you could miss them. You could miss them. You have to get close and really look to see those. And so now we're going to zoom in and look a little closer at some of the specific details in this painting. We can see Mary's hand, his finger is tucked in that book there. We think it might be a prayer book, and we can definitely infer her intelligence and her piety. Now look at this, a very thin veil or scarf that's winding around her arm and the book. And we can think this is a reference maybe to Christ's burial that's being predicted and prophesied in this painting. I also just wanted to zoom in and show you this landscape that Raphael painted. And I don't know if you can see in the bottom left here, those are riders on horses. And there's a little cluster of them at the front of the painting, but even further back in, seems to be a little band of more horse riders. And just to see, I just think that's fun to see. And then capturing the gaze of these two boys is the reed of the cross. And so even though it's just this beautiful scene, it is full of somber prophecy, predicting Christ's passion and sacrifice. And then I wanted to tell you that Raphael used flowers, plants from nature to also add symbolic meaning. And I'll pause here to say, I had a teacher at the gallery say, you need scholarly evidence to know that symbols are really in place to add this extra layer of meaning. For instance, if you were to hear the song, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, you can think, oh, is this Mary of the Bible and her son, fleece white as snow? Well, that's Jesus, the pure sacrifice, the Lamb of God. And it's like, well, unless there's scholarly evidence and notes from the painter, it's just a childhood ditty. So, but we actually do think that Raphael included a lot of layers and meaning into this painting. And so I'm going to just tell you on the upper right here, oh no, top left here is a dandelion. It's the bitter herb that symbolizes Christ's coming suffering and death on the cross. Right below it on the left is a violet, and it's near Mary, and it signifies her humility. Violets can also signify modesty, virtue, watchfulness, faithfulness, and love, which would all apply to Mary. But here we're going to focus on that as humility. In the middle top, underneath St. John the Baptist's chubby little elbow there is an anemone, which is a flower also known as the Easter flower or the flower of the resurrection because of its ancient associations with immortality. The bottom here, center, are these shoots of lady's bedstraw, which is a yellow wildflower that had medicinal properties believed to ease childbirth. And they were also said to have been found in the manger where Jesus was laid after he was born. And then on the right, we have cyclamen, which refers to the love and sorrow of Mary. And so here I just marked where these plants were on the painting since they were so close up in the other one. You can look through and see where they are there. I want to talk to us a little bit about Raphael. He was, he's known as a painter who had the easy grace and harmonious balance that really represented ideal perfection. He was known in person as somebody with wit and charm, and often he was called the Prince of Painters. He most likely studied with his father, who was a court painter in Urbino, but his father died when he was 11. And we know that he went on to Florence and painted at the same time as Leonardo and Michelangelo. When we think of the high Renaissance, the trinity of the amazing painters, we would have Raphael, Michelangelo, and Leonardo. And Raphael was the younger of them. And he actually was influenced by them in some ways, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I wanted to show you that we think of him like we're looking at an oil painting by Raphael today, but he also made tapestries, and on the left here are some tapestries that were hung in the Sistine Chapel. And he was a cartoonist. It's fun word to learn, which means he designed these pictures for the weaving and the threads and the making of the tapestry. And then on the right, it shows that he painted frescoes, and those are in what we call the 4 Raphael rooms of the Vatican. And so these are big frescoes which are painted into plaster. It's a different process and a different technique. And so he finished his career painting in Rome and painted a lot for the Pope. And when he died at 37, the Pope ordered that he was buried in the Pantheon. That's a little bit about Raphael there. And so before we close, let's take another 30 seconds and look back again at this Mary, Jesus, and St. John the Baptist, and look at this Raphael round painting. Just let your eye roam and meander through this. Maybe find something in the background you hadn't seen before. Look at those plants again. Look at the folds of her dress, their skin. Just enjoy. So my invitation today is, I just want to circle back to the Madonnas of humility. And I just love that Mary is sitting on the ground and connected and paying attention to these 2 boys. And it's just an invitation for us to remember, while we're in quarantine and maybe with the same people month after month after month, let's put our phone down when someone's talking to us. Let's look at them in the eye. Let's delight in them. Let's get on the ground and pay attention to the people we're with. That's my invitation for today. Now, if you'd like to be done, the art break technically is over. But since we were looking at Raphael, there's just so much that I wanted to give us a little final course. If you have a very long, fancy meal with many, many courses, the very last course is called Mignardises et Petit Four. And that is these little bite-sized desserts are passed around, and they're just small, little bite-sized, delicious tastes. And so I had a few more things that I wanted to share about Raphael. And since we were looking today, I thought I'd show us. So first, I wanted to say that one of the things he's known for really learning from Leonardo da Vinci is the softly shadowed form, the natural figure groupings, and the simplified settings. That was all something very new that Leonardo's doing, and Raphael responded to these techniques. And then while we're on Leonardo, it's just fun to remember that he has 4 for sure, maybe 5 female portraits. And so I wanted to show us these. And on the second in on the top left, that's at the National Gallery of Art. This is our Ginevra da Vinci. And that's the Leonardo painting that we have at the National Gallery of Art in DC that I hope you'll come and see. And then I wanted to show us some of the influence with Michelangelo, because Michelangelo was working at this time too, and they knew one another and impacted one another. And Michelangelo was very influenced by the idealized classical art from the city's ancient past. And so his paintings took on this new grandeur. And he also responded to the more energetic and physical style of Michelangelo, whose works he began to study in Florence and then continued on when he was in Rome. And I just wanted to say, if we remember in our album Madonna, that the Mary has these blue sandals on, these leather strappy sandals, and Raphael had kind of taken the idea from a sculpture at the Vatican that had ancient sandals on one of the sculptures, and he made them in blue in that painting on the Madonna. And then just to look again at Michelangelo's painting in the Sistine Chapel, it's just fun to see. And if you've come to the art break that's on Vermeer and the woman holding a balance in the back, Vermeer has his own version of the Last Judgment of Christ. And so I just thought it's fun to see here. It's a lot of commotion going on, but that against the back wall is the Last Judgment of Christ by Michelangelo. And since we're looking at the Sistine Chapel, I just picked 2 that I enjoyed. The Creation of Adam on the left, And then that separation, the one on the right is called Separation of Light from Darkness. Another little tidbit, if you're interested, is I have the Vatican on the left and then a Medici courtyard here on the right. Where does all this money come from for the arts? And we know the Vatican was very wealthy and could sponsor a lot of the arts. And there's also this other little kind of undercurrent. Oh, sorry, that's my dogs. That the Medicis would loan money to the Vatican. And the Vatican would say, thank you for the loan, but you're charging usury, which is in the Bible is a sin, and we call it interest. And so since the Medici family was charging the Vatican usury for the money it loaned, the Vatican said your penance is now to sponsor the arts. And so the Medici actually had many artist studios that they sponsored in Florence. And for a while, even Michelangelo lived with the Medici in their compound and would even have meals with them. And so the Medici were benefactors to Brunelleschi, Donatello, Fra Angelica, and then maybe you've heard of Botticelli and Verrocchio, in addition to these other artists. And so I just thought that's kind of an interesting. Then my last little nugget, and it's way out of my league science-wise, but before the Alba Madonna was with the National Gallery of Art, it was in Russia at the Hermitage, and it was during that time period that it was taken from panel of wood to canvas. And so the little I can tell you is that this is a picture of that process, but not on our painting, but it's just kind of a little picture of the process, that the practice of conserving an unstable painting on panel by transferring it from its original decayed, worm-eaten, cracked, or distorted wood support to canvas or a new panel. It's been practiced for a long time. And one of the what they did in general was they would put smooth sheets of paper, they were pasted over the painted surface of the panel, and then a layer of muslin was added over that. The panel was then fixed face down to a table, and the wood planed away from the back until it was as thin as a plane could safely go. And then the remainder was scraped off with a sharp instrument, such as a razor. The ground of the painting was then removed by solvents or scraping until nothing remained but a thin skin of color, pasted over with paper and held together by the muslin. We think that there was a little damage done to our Alba Madonna in the top rightish area. But otherwise, I mean, the conservators are amazing. They are chemists and scientists and amazing. And I remember I was talking to my husband about this painting and he said, what? They took it from panel to canvas? And I think that the story with ours is that the panel, I don't know about cracked or worm-eaten, but I don't know about decayed or worm-eaten. I heard that it was cracking, that there was a long split in the panel. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting. And so if you stayed with me this long, you got some extra little nuggets that I had discovered as I was preparing this and I wanted to share with you. So thank you, team, for showing up for an art break. I'm so glad you did. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. See you next time.